welcome to Wave Support. I see from your clinical request that you have a patient who's returning to gas perm lenses but struggling with some comfort issues. I appreciate the video that you sent along. That was very helpful in seeing how this lens sits on the eye. And as you know from the video, your right is a very well-centered lens, but there were some areas of bearing out here in the peripheral areas, as well as an area of probably excessive bearing down here, creating some probably the problem area for the discomfort. So if we look at the design, just a couple of general comments. The 10.5 diameter, although it looks pretty nice on there, might be a little aggressive for this patient. I'm not sure what the person or the patient previously had, but if it was a little bit smaller diameter, say 9.5 to 9.8 or so, you may want to try to stay a little bit smaller. That may help reduce the potential for the edge of that lens to bump into limbal regions. If not, if we were a little larger like that, that's fine. Then I would concentrate on just trying to realign these peripheral curves here. And one of the things you may have noticed from that fluorescein pattern was definitely we're a little steeper here in the central part of the cornea and a little steeper in the central part, a little flatter out through here. So we definitely had a steeper fit, which of course is intuitively a little bit better for these multifocal lenses, but in this case we're getting some lens awareness. In my experience, normally when these patients are complaining about that dry feeling later and they put drops in, they're really talking about awareness of this zone out here. The lens is just probably rubbing too much out here. So I try to work on realigning this peripheral part of the cornea. And if we look at your design, the easiest way to do that is to maybe consider going from axial design over tangential. You may recall that axial tends to look at the central part of the topography very closely, and then but not as closely at this peripheral part of the cornea. Whereas tangential tends to be the opposite, tends to line up lenses very nicely with this peripheral part of the cornea and be not as closely in the central part. The end result is that tangential lenses tend to have a little bit flatter fit and probably a little better alignment out here, and axial tend to be a little bit steeper. And so when I have some of these patients who are struggling with the comfort, quite often I'll either try to realign this area out here, or then I'll just switch over, very easily switch over to tangential design. And when you do that, you'll notice right away when I switch over, hold on a second, when I switch over here from axial, and if you look at that same design from a tangential perspective, you'll notice that the lens all of a sudden looks a little steeper, and you probably have this area coming down into through here, and it angles downward, and you basically get this angling down, kind of downturners here, almost digging into the cornea. And so my guess is that's where you run in those areas, and through here where it just kind of digs in. So to better realign that, I would just switch over to tangential and let wave do its thing. And now you have a lens that's probably going to fit about a half diopter flatter in these areas, probably give you a little nicer alignment. Another tool that a lot of the docs like to use is this little aspheric design. That usually adds a little more flatness in here by giving a little more aspheric curvature there. Just another comment on these topographies. If you look, you may recall that this right here is the wave's interpretation of your true corneal topography. And when you first open up Wave software by using the Wave icon, you may recall it gives you the option of averaging astigmatism or not averaging astigmatism. Sometimes in these larger astigmatic corneas, I tend to go for the non-averaged astigmatism. So in this case, you'll see what Wave interpreted to look like your cornea, and you'll see it's a little bit more evening of the red in through here as compared to the actual true topography. And I open up a lens here where I did not average the corneal astigmatism, and you'll see when we put those side by side, you've got a very much of an hourglass effect. You get a little bit more closer look to that in this cornea where we did not average the astigmatism. So I went through it. If you redesign the lens on that, you might get a little truer representation of these corneal meridians. And I even went one step further and clicked over to a freeform design. And lo and behold, if you look at that very closely, now I got a lens that pretty much aligns in all meridians. And you've also got, if you remember, this representation is the back surface of the lens. This very closely mimics this front surface of the true corneal topography. Now again, we also have a very nice close match in your design here. However, keep in mind this is probably not truly a true representation of that cornea. Now granted, my guess is this patient is not wearing a free-form lens prior, and so they're probably wearing more of a spherical lens, so this is probably a mood issue in this particular instance, but I just thought I'd draw a little attention to that one. So to summarize things, I would work on better aligning these peripheral areas. You're right, that's probably the problem area. Somehow flattening it up a little bit more out here. And the easiest way to do that, just switch over to tangential, use your current design philosophy. Maybe shrink it up a little bit if you can get away with that. That'll reduce the tendency of this lens to bump into the uh, limbus. From a power standpoint, it's a tough one. As you know, if you got a monocular patient, you can't do too much more here with the pupil size, unless you're going to crowd that. You're going to lose too much of the distance area. So you could try bumping this up a little bit higher, maybe another half or so, just to see if you can get a little bit more out of that ad on that patient, and kind of go from there. Well, anyways, with that, I hope these are helpful tips and get you right on track with this patient. I wish you well, and thank you for contacting Wave Support. Have a great day.